I moved to Mexico thinking the biggest culture shocks would be things like language, traffic, different food, maybe even the heat. But one of the biggest shocks was this. You are not really supposed to drink the tap water in most parts of Mexico. And before anybody gets offended, no, this is not one of those America good, Mexico bad videos. Because once I started looking into this, I realized this topic is way more complicated than Americans could ever think. And honestly, way more interesting as well. Because growing up in the United States, most Americans never even think about water or where it comes from. You walk to a sink, you turn it on, you drink it, and you move on with your life. Nobody stands there questioning the faucet like it's suspicious, like a drug deal. But then you move to Mexico and suddenly everybody starts warning you about the water. Don't drink the tap water. Be careful brushing your teeth. Don't swallow shower water. Watch the ice. And at first, it honestly sounds dramatic. Meanwhile, I'm standing there like, wait, so the sink is basically trying to kill me now? Therefore, I started researching it because I genuinely wanted to understand why. Why is this such a big deal? And one of the first things that surprised me was a lot of Mexicans don't drink the tap water either. That's completely changing how I see the whole situation because before moving to Mexico, I honestly thought this was mostly just a tourist problem. Like, weak American stomach can't handle Mexico. But then I realized people all over Mexico use the 5 gallon bucket, those giant purified water jugs that you see everywhere. Homes, restaurants, businesses, tiny homes, apartment buildings. They're literally part of everyday life here. Therefore, the question changed completely in my brain. Now, it wasn't, why can't tourists drink the water? Now it became, why do so many people in Mexico avoid drinking the tap water? And once I started digging deeper, I realized the answer is actually really important. Because from what I found, the issue often isn't necessarily the water source itself. A lot of the water in Mexico is actually treated and chlorinated, but the infrastructure can vary massively depending on the region. The pipes, the storage tanks, the building plumbing, delivery systems, old infrastructure, inconsistent maintenance. And that is where things are starting to get a little complicated because Mexico is huge. Let's be real. Different cities have different systems, different quality levels, different infrastructures, different challenges. Therefore, there are actually places where some people do drink the tap water. I've actually heard people say that parts of Monterey are safer. Some areas have filtration systems. Some newer buildings filter the water internally. Some locals drink the water in certain regions and never have any issues. But in other areas, some people absolutely would never risk it. And honestly, that's where Americans sometimes misunderstand Mexico. Because Americans often talk about Mexico like it's one giant water system, when really it varies massively depending on where you are living. And then I realized something else. The United States is not perfect either. Because once I started researching water infrastructure, America has had serious water problems as well. Lead pipes, chemical contamination, entire cities with major water issues. Flint, Michigan became world famous because of this. Therefore, this isn't some simple America has perfect water, Mexico has bad water. This is not the reality. But I do think that there is a major difference in consistency because in the United States, most Americans expect tap water to be drinkable almost everywhere. That expectation is built into daily life. But in Mexico, a lot of people grow up already expecting to use purified water instead. Therefore, the giant water jugs suddenly started making way more sense to me. Because when I first moved here, I thought, why are these people carrying around these big jugs? Is this like an old school cultural thing? But now I realize, no, this is literally part of everyday infrastructure in every way possible. And honestly, the funny part is you can instantly tell when somebody is brand new in Mexico because every foreigner eventually has that paranoid water phase. You accidentally get one drop of the shower near the mouth and suddenly you start planning your funeral. Meanwhile, Mexican people are just casually living life completely unbothered. But then I found out another interesting piece of this. Apparently, a lot of travelers don't even necessarily get sick because the water is poison. Sometimes their body just isn't adapted to the bacteria or the microorganisms in the environment. Different countries have different bacteria. different mineral content, different microorganisms, and local people build a tolerance over time. Therefore, locals can often handle things that many tourists can't. And honestly, that part fascinated me because it reminded me of how adaptable humans actually are. But then I found out another thing that people keep mentioning: hard water, mineral water. And if you're living in parts of Mexico, you know exactly what people are talking about. You'll see this mineral buildup in sinks, faucets, shower heads. Sometimes it'll feel like the water is leaving behind enough minerals to start building a second bathroom by itself. And honestly, the deeper that I looked into this, the more that I respect Mexico for adapting around these challenges, because despite all these infrastructure differences, the purified water system here is actually incredibly efficient. Those giant water jugs get delivered everywhere. Stores always have them. Restaurants usually use purified water, and a lot of ice is purified as well. And after living here for a while, the whole system starts feeling completely normal. Therefore, when I went back to the United States, drinking straight from the sink almost felt kind of weird, like my brain got retrained. And honestly, I think this topic reveals something bigger about culture as well, because Americans sometimes assume that this is the normal way. But then you move somewhere else and you realize different countries simply adapt to different problems. Mexico adapted around infrastructure and realities. People built systems around it: home filters, purified delivery systems, 5-gallon bottles, boiling water, and that became a normal everyday life type of thing. And honestly, that's fascinating to me. But then there's another thing Americans sometimes get wrong. Some tourists act like touching sink water in Mexico instantly destroys your immune system forever. And that's honestly just exaggerated as well, because millions of people live perfectly healthy lives here. You can shower, you can wash your hands, you can brush your teeth in many places of Mexico. You can live completely normal. And therefore, I think that some Americans accidentally disrespect Mexico by exaggerating the situation way too much, because the reality is way more nuanced than people might it seem online. And honestly, that's the whole reason I wanted to make this video. Because before moving here, I didn't understand how any of this worked. I just heard, don't drink the water in Mexico. But once I actually started researching why, I suddenly connected to infrastructure, economics, public utilities, tourism, culture, daily habits, and regional differences. And the whole thing became way more interesting than I ever expected. And honestly, now that the giant water jug lifestyle feels weirdly normal to me, like if I were to walk into somebody's house and didn't see a 5-gallon bucket, part of my brain might be immediately like, wait a minute, how are these people even surviving? But I'm honestly curious, guys. If you're Mexican, do people drink from the tap water where you live? Or do most people just use purified water? And if you're American, what surprised you the most about the water situation in Mexico? Drop a comment below and let me know, because I'm still learning all this stuff too. And if you enjoy conversations where I try to understand the real differences between Mexico and the United States together with you guys, make sure you subscribe. I'm definitely not an expert in any of this, guys. I'm just a guy living in Mexico from the US, and I get curious about stuff, and then I fall down a rabbit hole trying to search stuff and understand better, and everybody comes along with me.